Okay, Tim, I think recording has begun. Hopefully you can all see my slides, and if not, please do, Tim, shout out. So welcome everyone to this evening's West Bristol Climate Action talk, where I'm Dan. I'm a volunteer for the West Bristol Climate Action, and this is my second talk that I've given for you guys. I think I did one about 18 months ago on regenerative agriculture. So really grateful to be back and hopefully share some good news about what we're up to. Before we do, it's just worth saying that the West Bristol Climate Action website has got lots of fabulous resources. If you haven't had a chance to have a look, please do. A lot of the team has been spending time writing blogs, making videos, creating interactive maps. So do, if you find yourself with a spare 5 or 10 minutes, go to westbristolclimateaction.org, where you can find all these different resources and more. Also worth saying as well, we are a very small organisation that runs off donations. So if you do feel like you can donate, there is a link there to our paypal.me website. So paypal.me/West Bristol to donate. Much appreciated if you do, but please don't feel obliged. So today, the webinar we're going to be talking about is how we made a meadow and how you can too. So it's going to be in part a story of what we've been up to over in Clifton, specifically on Clifton Hill, but I'm hoping that I can divulge a bit of information about how you might be able to take some learnings from what we've been doing to create one yourselves. So it's going to be half anecdote and maybe half a bit of a lesson as well. And I can see there's other people on the call that are more expert than I. So if you have got any questions throughout, please do use the chat function on Zoom, and we've got a dedicated question and answer session towards the end. So agenda, I'm really going to start by just giving a personal introduction to West Bristol Climate Action, just explaining why I've got involved and how I see it as a really good organisation to deliver a lot of the key things that I want to see happen across the city. And then going to spend a bit of time explaining what a wildflower meadow is, just what to look out for, a bit of a definition, so to speak. Then we're going to dive into the more practical elements of finding and planning a site for wildflowers. I really want people to go away today with at least a bit of confidence that they can get involved in creating, or at least site finding for wildflowers, and knowing who to get in contact with if you do want to take it to the next step. The bulk of the discussion will be around Clifton Hill itself. I've labelled it the Clifton Hill experiment because we decided, and I'll explain a bit more later, we decided not to just go straight down the middle and do one way of establishing wildflowers. We've actually got 4 different techniques running at the moment. So I'll give you a bit of an update of how that experiment, so to speak, has been going. And then at the end, I'm delighted to say that we will be premiering our film, How to Make a Meadow, that many of the West Bristol volunteers feature in, and we're really grateful to the team that's made it. And I'm very happy with how it's come out. So excited to share. And it is worth saying that that will be shared on our YouTube channel and on our website at the end of this session. So you'll be the first people to see it, but then you will be able to share it or rewatch it if you so need to. As I mentioned, we've got a Q&A session, and we'll be doing that after the film premiere, because I'm hoping that some of the questions you may have are answered during the film. So if I fail to mention something, Sue and the team has told a very good story through that premiere. I think we've got an hour in the diary. My slides should take between 35 and 40 minutes, and then we've got a 8-minute film, so there should be 15 minutes or so at the end for those Q&As. So West Bristol Climate Action is a small organisation full of volunteers, varying talents and skill sets, and it's a privilege to be part of it. Our ambition really is to support West Bristol in becoming low carbon, improving wildlife corridors and supporting wildlife generally, reducing pollution, engaging the public, and supporting the council in their ambitions. And I'll touch on those ambitions in a moment. And all of these little things are made up of lots of little actions, and anything we can do to encourage members of the public to take the little actions, we hopefully will start to get the sum of the parts equaling slightly greater than the whole. There's lots of great things that you can do now. So if you are looking for inspiration or want to get involved in any volunteering or just work out the little actions you can take, please do go onto our website. We are always open as well for people to come and join our monthly meetings, and I'm sure at the end we can do a bit of an advertisement of that. But if you are interested in joining, say, the committee, or at least coming to do some of the planning that happens behind the scenes, please do get in touch via our website. I just wanted to set the scene just for 2 moments, just to make people aware of where Bristol's currently stood on the ecological emergency. So hopefully you're all aware at the moment that we're seeing rather catastrophic decline in the environment, and especially biodiversity. I think just last week, they've just, a new paper coming out saying that we've now lost 70% of all biomass since 1970, which is a huge amount. And that's, way a bit longer than my lifespan, but there's a number of people on the call that's been within one lifetime. It was great in 2020 for Bristol to declare an ecological emergency, which now legally means that the environment is hopefully being represented, but we're really still keen to see more action happening on the ground. Within the ecological emergency, they released a strategy that fits under this Bristol One City initiative. And the 4 main bullet points that I just wanted to extract from that was they're looking to have 30% of land in Bristol managed for the benefit of wildlife. Now, there's obviously a bit of nuance in that definition, but that's at least looking at 30% of all land that they currently manage to be promoting, whether that's pollinators or habitats for hedgehogs or tree planting. It's basically sharing that land or sparing that land for wildlife. They're also looking to reduce their use of pesticides by at least 50%. They're also trying to promote all waterways to have excellent water quality, to support healthy wildlife, and they're also trying to reduce the consumption of products that undermine the health of wildlife and ecosystems around the world. Now, I personally think they're really great ambitions, but what we want to make sure is that, 1, we're holding them to account, and 2, helping them as much as possible achieve those. It's not a small order to try and get 30% of land, for example, managed for wildlife, but I want to really empower people here to at least know how they can play at least a part in that process. If you want to read more about it, do go on the bristol.gov website. There is lots of PDFs and information out there, including their new biodiversity, nature recovery network mapping that they've been doing for the Southwest, which is interesting. So to dive into what is a wildflower meadow, a wildflower meadow is I found a definition of a permanent grassy area dominated by perennial flowers. So it's an area that is dominated by flowers that reoccur annually. So the difference between a perennial and an annual flower is that it doesn't need to restart its life cycle at the end of the year. So in this photo on the right-hand side, the oxeye daisies you can see are perennial. So if you cut them, they're going to grow from the same stem. Whereas the poppies you can see are annual. So they restart their life cycle each year when they set seed. So these habitats are hugely beneficial. Predominantly, they provide a really rich pollen resource for our declining invertebrates, so our bees and our butterflies have somewhere to feed, somewhere to nest. And by providing those insects and invertebrates with somewhere to hopefully have respite, they also are an area, also providing any predators that might feed on those insects with food and resource as well. So by growing a wildflower meadow, not only are you helping that first level up the food chain, so to speak, the butterflies and the bees, you're also helping those that predate on those insects as well. And it's that hierarchy that underpins the importance of these wildflower meadows. Also, the other benefits, aesthetics. Hopefully in a minute you'll be able to see some more photos of our wildflowers that we've been growing up in Clifton, and they are there to both be visually and hopefully educationally stimulating to you as you walk past them. So it's not just about wildlife, it's really here about trying to engage people, engage the public in getting involved with wildflowers. The final point around and can save money is still something that we're trying to get across to the council. Traditionally, well, and I'll come on to this, a site like Clifton Hill, it's mown up to 12 times a year, which is costing the council, a contractual fee every time that someone comes and mows. What we're really trying to promote is looking for these areas that don't need to be mowed 12 times a year and can be mowed, once or twice a year, thus saving you money. Even though there might be a bit of upfront capital investment, we are, there are papers out there and reports that show that the money that can be saved over time. And I think Dorset County Council is a really good one that I think we've got a link on our website. Wider context is that since 1930s, according to the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew, that we've lost 97% of all our wildflower meadows. So post First World War into the Second World War, a lot of these really rich habitats got either torn up to grow crops or just simply overgrazed or managed in a slightly different way, mainly for the production of food. But any of you that attended my regenerative agricultural talk last year or want to catch up on it, these wildflower meadows are coming back within the agricultural landscape, which is really great to see. Today, I'm not going to be speaking really about the rural wildflowers that you find, but more focusing on our dear city of Bristol. So the main things to think about when you're creating a wildflower meadow, there's four main bullet points that I wanted to get across. And at the end, I've got a slide that's going to hopefully remind you of these. But wildflower meadows require ultimately sunshine. So having sunshine is one of the key factors that differentiates, a good wildflower meadow or a poor wildflower meadow. So when you're looking for a site, just ask yourself, is this site receiving sunlight? We've had a couple of messages through the website about potential sites, and some of them are on north-facing banks, for example, or hidden behind a big building. What we're really looking for a wildflower meadow is something in a direct sunlight for a majority, if not all of the day. Secondly is low fertility. And when I say fertility, that's the amount of nutrients that are currently within the soil. The reason for this is grass does really well on high fertility soil. So when there's lots of nutrients in the soil, grass grows quickly. And if grass grows quickly, the wildflowers don't have a chance to grow themselves. Good drainage is another quite key factor, although it's not it's wholly important. But what that means is that wildflowers really don't like having their roots wet. I think a lot of people say keep their feet dry, so to speak. So areas that have got good drainage are also ideal for wildflowers. Those three, sunshine, low fertility, and good drainage, are really site specific. You can do management to increase sunshine, such as pollarding trees, for example. You can reduce fertility, and I'll come on to that in a bit later, but by preparing the ground correctly and also the longer term management, but you can't really do much in terms of drainage. The final point, however, irregular mowing, once or twice a year, is something that's fundamentally under the control of yourself or whoever's managing the site. I'll come on to our mowing regime over at Clifton Hill, but one of the main things that wildflowers really can't stand is being cut too often. So even if you're just trying to get some flowers into flower, reducing the amount of mowing is a really good place to start. So the top tip that I've left here, and I think it's one of the key points, especially when you're trying to start planning your wildflower meadow, is that just always think that grass is going to outcompete wildflowers. How do you reduce the amount of grass? You can cut it nice and tight, and you can remove the clippings all the time. So when you are preparing and managing a wildflower meadow, always remove the clippings, try and reduce those nutrient levels, get that fertility nice and low, and hopefully your wildflowers will start to thrive. So Clifton Hill, I actually don't think I put in a more of a contextual map, but I've got some lovely drone photos courtesy of Jeremy, who's fed into the film that you'll see a bit later. I personally live about 200 meters to the north of this photo, so just around the corner. That's where I'm currently sat, and I've been walking past this site for the last 4 years, always going, yeah, that would be a really good wildflower meadow. You can walk along the grass, and I've got the details in a moment, but before we even did anything, and this is obviously before, you could see patches of herbs, so just patches where it wasn't clearly grass. It might be dandelion or oxeye daisies, but you could clearly see that just the site was already holding quite a strong population of wildflowers, and that was mainly due to sunshine and good drainage. So this photo probably was taken about 5 or 6 p.m, maybe a bit earlier, but during when it's sunrises, literally the sun streams down, and this is all in bright sunshine throughout the day. So just to reiterate, sunshine is key. You can't quite see the topography, but it's sloping down here towards the harbour side. So this is on a bit of a bank, bit of a hill, good drainage. I've put a cross next to low fertility, and that's not really due to the soil type itself. It's just due to the management. So we're not sure how long since, but ever since the council has been mowing it, it's been a regular mow and leave. And when we say mow and leave, that means that they're not collecting the cuttings after they've mown, and that just lets the grass mulch down. So for the last 30 plus years, every time a mower went over this ground, they left the grass clippings, and therefore it's mulching down into the soil, increasing that fertility. So what we decided to do with respect to the site was getting permission from the council. So it's worth saying that once you've found a site, identifying who owns that site or who has managerial rights over that is probably one of the first steps you need to take. Obviously, we've been focusing on council-owned land, but there are obviously university land around, there's hospital land. But if you've got a site in mind, just try and find out who owns that. One of the best avenues would definitely just contact the Parks Department of the council. If you've not been on the Parks Department website, don't worry, just go on Google or whatever you use as a search engine and just type in "get involved at Bristol Parks." And they've actually got quite a nice website that allows you to get some information, get in contact with the local parks manager, etc. And I've put this here as my first tip: try and get a site meeting. I think it was kind of the main win we had was actually getting Taya, who's our parks department manager, out onto a site. So I managed to meet her in person. This day and age, everyone is getting lots of emails, especially people in the council. And if you can't get them out on site, you're going to really struggle to be able to communicate what you're really wanting to do. Plus, during those site visits, someone like Taya or whoever is the parks manager of your area also can help you design and understand what that site might be doing. Once you've had a site meeting, the council might encourage you, for example, to draft a management plan. These aren't always needed, and if you're feeling you don't have the confidence to draft a management plan, please do not worry. You can either obviously work with your parks manager or get in touch with local organisations like West Bristol Climate Action. We're more than happy to meet you on site and maybe draft a management plan with you. But what that management plan does is it just articulates what you think that site could be doing. So in our case, I'll touch on it in a moment, but obviously creating wildflowers, giving public access, trying to reduce the amount of mowing, etc. We were advised as part of that initial site meeting that we needed permission, but not just permission from the council. We needed public backing that this was a good thing to do. So we had to create a public consultation. I think the target they gave us was for 100 people to support it. So luckily we have a lot of great volunteers, and I think Julie was the one that's masterminded this poster and a couple of others, where we just pinned on some lampposts this QR code with a bit of a high level brief, not trying to overcomplicate it, and people could scan that on their smartphones and fill out a quick Google form, wondering whether whether they were interested in us having a wildflower meadow here or not. The other thing that I really wanted to just touch on that is just another great way of communicating is making a map. I might be a little bit biased because I actually do work for this mapping company called the Land App, but we offer a free mapping service for people like yourselves to draft up a bit of a plan. And the reason that I love maps, and I hope people out there do as well, is it completely removes any nuance in communication. You're not trying to describe where that wildflower is going. You're saying exactly what your plan is. Other things that come from creating a map in the digital form like I'm showing is you can also, for example, derive the exact area. So if you're looking to order seeds, for example. So this is our plan, and I think I'm going to dive into the plan a bit more later, but you can see that I think this was one of the earlier plans, which the wildflower meadow on the left-hand side hadn't quite been given the experimental splitting that I'll come on to later. But we really wanted to understand how we could both, improve the diversity of the land without reducing people's access to it as well. Worth saying that if you are interested in creating maps, do go on the landapp.com, and we have got some help guidance and videos on there if anyone wants to get started in creating their own map, labeling it up, etc. So the results from the public consultation were overwhelmingly positive. In total, we had 273 people respond. There's about 6 questions on there, but the first question was simply, do you support the proposal? 98.9% of people said yes. The other 1.1% of people said no, and that was a total of 3 people. Within the form, we did ask them, do you have any comments? And for the 3, all 3 of them were concerned about the daffodils. And just to go back one slide, the daffodils themselves were along the top bank, and they were out in March till April. They don't last very long, but they were obviously quite an aesthetically pleasing part of the bank. So we had to renegotiate with the council. We redrafted the management plan, and we did take the questions and the concerns, particularly from those that said no, into the redrafting that management plan, which particularly covered the word daffodils. And you can see that I was surprised. I think they're beautiful, but I was surprised how many people mentioned the word daffodils in their comments. If you haven't seen a word cloud before, they're what they represent. We basically copied and pasted all of the answers to the comments section within the form, and the bigger the word, the more people that said it. So the word idea came out the most. It's the biggest word, hopefully prefixed by the word great that you can see here. And there's lots of support Clifton pollinators, but it's quite an interesting one if you look close. There's loads of great words: fabulous, environment, plants, all of these different great words. It's just a nice way of demonstrating people's sentiment. So we had success, and hopefully I haven't skimmed through that too much, but it was, drafting a management plan, getting public backing, speaking to the council, making sure they're aware of what you want to do, and getting ecological help as and when you need it. I was fortunate enough to have a bit of training in creating a wildflower meadow. I did a zoology degree and then ended up working for 3 years on farms giving environmental advice. So I was providing that management plan designing myself. But understanding who you can talk to, and I will come on to the people like the Avon Wildlife Trust in a moment, is a really nice first step in designing your plan. Now the slightly trickier bit was once you've got the plan and it's accepted, it was just working out how are we going to fund this. The wildflower seeds isn't free. Getting mowers and tools isn't free. So we had to work out a budget and raise some funds for this. Again, credit to my team, or the team of West Bristol Climate Action. I cannot take any credit for how successful the fundraising went. Nicola and Julie in particular, and a couple of others, Grant and Roxanne, thank you so much for all the effort you put in. What we did is we created a GoFundMe page. Within that GoFundMe page has some nice photos, a clear goal in terms of a budget. And we again used our good old friend, the QR code, and just stuck these over the old posters to say, look, we've been successful, but would you like to now almost invest in this wildflower meadow? And I must admit, I was overwhelmed by how many people funded and got involved. I think you can see the stats here. We've had 78 different people donate, which if people can just give a £5, £10, it's really added up quite nicely. And I think we had some anonymous donors that were donating like £200 or £300 as well. So we were in a very fortunate position and very grateful. But it is worth saying that for the wider Bristol network, it may not go all tickety-boo as well. And just to note, there are funding streams out there for people wanting to do this stuff. So whether it's the council or there's a lot of other schemes, do get in touch if funding seems to be the blocker, and we'd love to at least point you in a direction where funding can be established. It's also worth saying actually that the council, during those negotiations, we really wanted the council to have buy-in as well. So we actually did manage to secure some funding through the council, and I'll come on to what they funded in a moment, but it represented about 25% of the total project. Alongside that contribution, the council also provides, and I think in the video later, Nicola articulates it better than I, but you can actually, if you're interested, there's a whole shed of tools that Bristol Council own that they allow volunteer groups to use if you so need. So that includes rakes, mowers, even scythes, if you can get training as well. So don't feel like that, access to tools is a blocker either. There's definitely support out there, and going through the parks department is definitely the route forward. So that was us raising the funds. Once we got the cash, and I can't remember what the time frame, it was something like within 3 days, we managed to hit our goal. Which was amazing, and I know there was a lot of planning behind to get to that, but it was really great to see. Just wanted to say that once you've got a site, you've got funding, one key work that we're really grateful for support of our friends at the Avon Wildlife Trust. I think, Sean, I saw you join, so thank you so much. Was doing a pre-work survey. So once you've got your site, it's always really good just to take stock of what's currently there. You don't want to go, diving in, seeding things that are already there, or maybe putting in, or seeding when actually it could have more, negative effects than positive. So, grateful for the expertise of the team at Grow Wilder, who not only provided us with their seeds and the quotes for the seeds, but they also, I think one afternoon went and did a pre-survey, which just identified on that bank, we already had 35 species of flowering plants. I really wanted to ham up that 35 species, because if you walked past it a year ago or 2 years ago, I think most people wouldn't have noticed that. And it wasn't the fact that there wasn't flowers there, it was just that the management strategy that was being used on that bank just wasn't complementary to wildflowers. Rule of thumb, especially in heights of summer, flowers will take between 4 to 6 weeks to actually reach flowering. So, at the height of summer, if the council, for example, is mowing every 2 to 4 weeks, there isn't actually enough time for the flowers to reach maturity to then, produce the beautiful colors for the food for the bees. So, sometimes, and I'll come on to this in a minute, that sometimes actually don't need to seed. The biggest action you could do is just reducing that mowing. And there are initiatives like Low Mow May, for example, that Bug Life promote. And just give that 4-week break to see what comes through. I think this photo on the right hand side is a cat's ear that I spotted back in 2021. It was in a corner that the council missed. So, but they are there. You just need to give them a chance. One other thing that the guys at Grow Wilder did, which was really I think a great addition, was not only did they do that survey, the seed mix that they provided us took into account what was already on the site. So we already had 35 species. There's no point trying to put those 35 species down. You might as well give other seeds a chance to get involved as well. So I would highly recommend, if you are looking to get seeds, do check out the Grow Wilder initiative that's based just up the M32 in North Bristol. So coming on to the Clifton Hill experiment, I like to think of it as an experiment. Like I said, I got a scientific degree. I thought this would be a nice lab, so to speak, for us to test a couple of theories. And I've been in the agriculture sector for a couple of years, and there's a couple of ways you can establish a wildflower meadow. Each of them have got pros and cons. So rather than just reading online, I thought, why not test ourselves and document what's happening. The 3 variables that we decided to look at really are the mowing regularity. So how often do you cut that patch of land? The time of year that you put the seeds down, and how much you disturb the soil. Now, I've covered mowing regularity. Mowing less just gives them a chance to grow. And there's definitely evidence for that, which I'll show you on one of my only sad slides left. The time of year for seeding is an interesting one, because the natural life cycle of a seed, if you think about it, it sets seed in late July, August, September. It then drops on the ground, and if it's outside, that seed then goes through a frost, or hopefully we continue to keep getting frosts, but it goes through a frost. And there's some science that's showing that frost actually triggers the seed to germinate the next year. If you put seeds down after the last frost, say you put down seeds in March and April, that some of the seeds haven't been triggered into germinating. So what you might find is if you seed after March, the theory goes, a lot of the seeds don't actually germinate until the following year because they haven't received that cold snap. And we wanted to test that as well. And we've definitely got evidence to back up what I've just said. And the final one is soil disturbance. And what we mean by soil disturbance is by turning the soil and releasing anything that's in there, breaking up the soil structure. And this is definitely in vogue in the agricultural sector at the moment. There's a lot of research that shows particularly the impact of deep ploughing on, say, flood resilience. When you break up soil and it rains, water can flow off that land a lot quicker than if you haven't broken up the soil and there's still roots intact, because the roots act as a bit of a sponge to suck in the water. Other negatives of disturbing soil, it does actually churn the soil and release carbon. So there's carbon locked up in the soil. If you turn the soil, that releases the carbon, and therefore we could be contributing to that ever-growing amount of carbon that's in the atmosphere. And then also you're breaking up all the the worms and the beetles, etc. Saying that, Traditionally, especially, those early pioneer species, those annuals, do really well in disturbed soil. An image to probably put in your head is, Flanders Field is covered in poppies. It was because there was so much soil disturbance. There was just so much surface area for the seeds to, latch onto that soil and start germinating and growing. So we wanted to basically change regularity of mowing, time of year, and the soil disturbance. And this was our plan. So this was the plan that we put in the document. I think we actually amended it probably in May 2022 after a visit by me and Taya. But just to go from left to right, we've got this left-handed bank, and just so you get your bearings, this is Birdcage Walk. So if you go up here, you end up at Can't Dance Coffee and Victoria Square, and then around this road to the left is up towards Copper Club into Clifton Village. Goldney Hall is just down here, and then round the right is towards Rose Merino Cafe. So this far left-hand bank, which was where the drone shot was earlier, is definitely, we picked as being the sunniest spot. It was getting sunlight all the way through the day. Towards the evening, the more easterly was getting shaded out by some of these buildings. So we thought, this one on the left-hand side is definitely where there's most sun. After the negotiations around, for example, the daffodils, we decided to just not, instead of using the whole bank, split off an area that we'd focus creating the wildflower meadows, and then split that wildflower into 3. So I've labeled them 1A, 1B, 1C. 1A, we decided to do maximum soil disturbance. So we decided to use a rotavator, which is a mechanical kind of spinner that chops up the soil, breaking it up, and providing a lot of soil contact for the seeds. And we did that in April 22. The middle one, 1B, we decided to do no soil disturbance. So what I meant is, instead of turning anything or even revealing any soil, our hardworking but poor volunteers were out for 2 days manually, it's called scarifying, but heavily raking that soil to try and reveal the top layer of soil and strip back all the grass, but without fundamentally destroying or turning over any of that soil structure. And then the third one, I just realized my arrow is missing. The third one, 1C, was moderate soil disturbance. So instead of mechanically turning the soil, using some shovels, we just turned the grass upside down and just revealed the soil underneath. So these 2 sites, 1B and 1C, were both done in November 21, so before that frost, and 1A was done after the supposed frost in April 22. The other part of the experiment, so this on the left, what we call hardcore wildflower meadow, which I'll show you some photos later, but we were aiming to get these flowers to only be cut once or twice a year, and aiming to get it up to my chest. Because this is a publicly accessible area, what we wanted to do was also demonstrate how you can introduce wildflowers while still allowing public access for picnics and people to lie on the grass. And so what we did in this orange section on the right hand side is seed something called a floral lawn. I've got a couple of slides on that, but the floral lawn is I don't know when the concept was introduced, but they're species of flower that you plant that actually do well retaining quite short, being quite small in height. So you are able to cut those more regularly, up to 8 times a year, providing that you give them that 4 to 6 week window in the middle to allow them to flower. So there's species like the clovers and the daisies and the medics and the self-heals, for example, which are all relatively shorter compared to some of the species that we were promoting in this left-hand panel. What we also agreed in May was basically I wanted to have an area that was no mow for 6 weeks, because I wanted to demonstrate that if you leave them, just give them a bit of breathing space, they will hopefully flower. Also worth saying, the council already, by their own initiative, and it's great to see, we're leaving these wildlife edges, I was calling them, which basically they just only mowed them less than 4 times a year. They let the cow parsley come up, rough edges underneath the trees. So the 13th of November 2021, there you are, Sean, with your push mower, carbon neutral mowing. We marked out the sites for those that wildflower area. So hopefully just get your bearings. That's heading up towards Clifton High Street. This was our site to start with. And just looking at this photo, some key things that I'm looking at. Obviously, I told you about the slope. It's a bit of a dreary day, so you can't see the sunshine. But if you look, there's a lot of things that are going to be contributing to fertility. So you've got leaf fall. So as the leaves fall and hit the ground, the fertility of that soil is going to go up as well. So we've got to reduce that fertility and also hope for the sunshine as well. Manually, we cut the lawn, I'm going to call it for now. We cut the lawn as much as we could to try and obviously get the grass clippings up and reduce those the nutrients as well. On that same day, the sun came out and our volunteers joined in, starting preparing those two sites, so 1B and 1C. What you're looking at is the site 1C. So this is our team of volunteers hand turning the soil with shovels. So they are digging their spade in, creating a little, what do they call it, a spit, I think, and then flipping the soil on top of itself. One thing to notice as part of the plan is we left these grass strips going between the turned soil, and that was back to my point around flooding and runoff. Well, the reason we did this is if it did rain heavily, we didn't want soil to run off down the slope and onto the path. They act as a bit of a buffer strip collecting soil. Again, we've got some nice drone photos just to give you a bit more context. There's a suspension bridge in the background, and there's some really nice shots that are going to come in this film premiere coming as well. And this is just a screen grab from that. But you can start to see it taking shape, site 1B and 1C. On the following day, the Sunday, we actually got the team down to put some seeds in the ground and also plants and plug plants. So the site we're looking at the moment is the bit that hasn't had any soil disturbance or minimum soil disturbance. I mean, he says there's troughs in the photo, but we haven't actually hand turned anything. We've just raked this as hard as we could. And I think we went over it 5 or 6 times with a rake and just trying to get as much grass off that as possible to give the seeds as much contact. Once we had done that, we spread the seeds that were provided by Grow Wilder. We divided it into 4 little tips, because then we knew how much seed we could use in each quarter. You do hear stories of people buying a kilo of seeds and accidentally just dropping all the seeds in one little section because they've used it all at once. So another top tip, just make sure you're being clear with your volunteer army about how many seeds go where. But we did a really good job, and hopefully the photos in a minute will display that. The plug plants themselves, the reason we were doing a mix of both seeds and plug plants is that these have obviously got, I don't know if I've got a close up in the slides, but they're just under a year-old plants, I assume, Sean, that are hopefully going to get away a lot quicker. So they've already got roots formed, they've already got leaves, they can start growing and establishing themselves, giving them a bit of a head start over the seeds. Both this site and the site just to the left-hand side had pretty much the same seed mix and the same plug plants. The only difference is because this is in the heart of Clifton, we did want year 1 to be quite showy, have some beautiful plants. Then we did put a couple more annual seeds in this left hand side, such as poppies, just to give it a bit more color. And you can see I'm working hard here with a coffee. So after that Sunday, this is what it looked like from the sky. You've got our 2 sites. This one's been heavily scarified with the plug plants in, and then this one's been hand turned. So we've done soil disturbance with the plug plants in as well. One of our biggest assets as well is this nice thick rope that later on I'll mention, but it did save us, I think, quite a few times. It's just a really nice way of not stopping people going in there, but definitely preventing the mowers going in there. And there's another photo just a bit more zoomed out. And actually, I went on Google the Earth the other day, and you get a similar image to this. You can see where we've done the 2 different management techniques. Worth saying that the floral lawn that I mentioned just a minute ago went on this bank and the bank to the east. And what we did is just after Christmas, I think it was early March, late February, we raked everything, took off as much of the nutrients as we could, gave it another cut or 2. And then seeded these low flowering plants. And it was this part that the council paid for. So the council provided all the seeds, paid for them for us to sow these 2 banks. So I think there's about 20 different species that went down there, but they were all what we call low flowering plants. So when they flower, they're at ankle height, but they do need 4 to 6 weeks to flower. So we played a bit of a waiting game over Christmas for the wildflower site. We had that site rotivated in March 22. I was actually on holiday, so I didn't have any photos of the rotivation happening, but I think there's a bit of a clip in the video. But around early May, we started to see some fruits of our labor. So this is a poppy, common poppy that we probably won't see too many of in the next year or two, and they'll start to fade away because, as my definition, the perennials should start to take over. But what we started to see was, especially in site 1, early May had a really thick covering of loads of different species. So you've got these cornflowers, you've got yellow rattle here, which I'll come to on in a moment. You've got poppy heads. And this amount of vegetation was, it was quite amazing to see. This instantly provides places for, insects to hide, to start to nest. And there was lots of spiders, webs, etc. falling. In comparison, this is the rotivated site on the same day, where you can just see tufts of grass, some patches of bare soil, and not a lot had happened. And I think in terms of the timing, we had quite a dry spring. So it was very dry in late March, early April when we put down the seeds. And by May, this had only had 6 weeks to get going, whereas the other site had since November. So it had that frost, and it had all that winter, all that really heavy rain that we had over Christmas to really get their roots established. So there was quite a visual difference between the ones sown before and after. 18th of May, just 3 days later, more poppies were coming through. You could see the thickness of that growing. But one of the main highlights, I would say, especially for year 1, was how much yellow rattle we managed to establish. Yellow rattle is what we like to call a bit of a wildflower catalyst. It's a parasite on grass. And back to my original slide, grass, you want to try and reduce. This flower actually attaches its roots to the roots of grass and extracts nutrients from the grass. So rather than getting all of its nutrients from photosynthesis, this species is, really, really key at reducing and suppressing that grass. And we had thousands of it. All of this yellow in the background is all yellow rattle. And we harvested it as much as we could. June came around and the color really just started to develop more and more. So this is still looking at that first site, site 1C. And you can see, I don't know how many different species are in that photo, but 20, maybe a bit more. You've got oxeye daisies, you've got those poppies, you've got lots of other things that I can't name, cornflowers. And all of this is providing that color for the aesthetics. We had people coming up and saying, wow, doesn't it look amazing? But also the bees were loving it as well. There was just so many bees and butterflies enjoying the extra food. On the same day, I think Nick took this photo as well, just giving a bit of context, but these flowers are getting up to our waist in height. Just wanted to just fly across around the same time, was just looking at the floral lawn. Unfortunately, whether it was miscommunication between the council, is we didn't actually manage to reduce their mowing regime as much as we wanted. And there was barely a time where we had more than 2 or 3 weeks before the site was mown. So actually for this whole of the bank, we didn't really get to see any flowers. So just what we're going to try and do is do it again next year, but we are going to invest in some rope. And rope isn't trying to be passive aggressive. It just genuinely works really well as a way of communicating to the mowers. I think just to understand the structure of how the council works of people who mow is, it's not actually a council worker most of the time that's doing the mowing. It's going through a contracting firm, and that contracting firm has got a plan for the next 12 months of where they're mowing and when, and to try and disrupt that, especially for these small sites, it's quite difficult. You've got to go through quite a few loops. However, if you put a nice thick rope, show a bit of authority, the mower does tend to go around the outside. And so, yeah, that's why we've got this, basically trying as much as we can to at least have an area of one of the banks where there's no mow for 6 weeks. Just wanted to now summarize some of the results we had. And I did have a couple of emails around the invertebrates, and unfortunately I didn't really collect as much data on the invertebrates as we probably should have. But I just wanted to show you just some key facts from just the flowers themselves. So in August 21, on the wildflower bank, we had 33 different species. And then in August 22, we have up to 83 different species that are now present. Some of them definitely doing better than others. But just, that there's a dramatic increase in just biodiversity and all the associated insects that are going to benefit from it. This sheet on the right hand side was our meadow spotting sheet that on the open gardens afternoon we had people running around our wildflower meadow and trying to find them. So coming to near the end of my slides, just to kind of sum up that, we had such a bumper crop of seeds that we managed to get volunteers out for 2 evenings where we were harvesting as many seeds as we could, filling up paper bags, mainly of that yellow rattle that I mentioned, being the parasite of grass. And we were just trying to find and try and harvest as much seed before we came and did a final cut. So I think this is Grant's hand displaying some of his findings. The reason we are harvesting it rather than just cutting it is because when you cut it, and even if you do leave it for a couple of days and remove the clippings, you can actually take away quite a lot of the seeds with you. So we harvested, a couple of bags of seeds, then we cut, mowed, removed those nutrients, like taking a traditional hay cut, and then we went back down and put the seeds on the ground. So just my top tips before we come on to this film premiere. I appreciate I've probably run over a little bit. 5 main points that I wanted to just recap is, if you're looking for a wildflower meadow, sunshine is key. Really don't not consider, shady areas, but they might be better suited for other things, orchards, for example. But sunshine's really key. Good drainage is also super helpful, especially if you're trying to, start not from zero. Low fertility should always be on the back of your mind. So always remove the clippings every time you cut the lawn, or mow the area, just remove those clippings with you. Otherwise you start to build up thatch. Communicate with the council is super key. Try and, we want to work as close as you can with your council representative. Just drop them an email, try and be friendly with them, get them on mobile, because otherwise you might end up with, a mower where you don't want them. And my final point is, I do think rope is a really, really powerful communication tool as well. So that's my slides for now. I just wanted to say a massive thank you to all volunteers, donors and supporters that helped get this wildflower up and running, getting it moving. I think I say in the film in a moment, I think we had over 50 different volunteers that came and helped throughout those different weekends of raking, seeding, soil turning, carrying bags of vegetation. And, we couldn't have done it without you. So thank you so much. And if you do want to get involved, of course, do go on to the West Bristol Climate Action.org website, where you can subscribe to our newsletters and learn a bit more about creating wildflowers. Now, before we come on to Q&A, although I can see some questions coming through the chat, what I wanted to do is launch or premiere our new film, which is called How to Make a Meadow. So I'm going to hopefully press play, and you're going to tell me if you can't hear it, but please enjoy How to Make a Meadow by West Bristol Climate Action. I'm Dan Geerah. I'm a local resident of Clifton and also a conservationist, and we're planning to turn this grassy bank into a wildflower meadow. Green is good, however what wildlife needs to thrive is variety. So what we're trying to do here is attract more plants, more flowers and more colours.
You can't do anything like this without the community being involved. So we've had some really interesting conversations with the community that we would never have had if we hadn't had this meadow being created right on people's doorsteps.
I just thought it was a really good idea. It's so much better than just scrubby grass.
Firstly, it's a fun thing to do, and I think if we can pull this off, it'll greatly enhance this little bit of Clifton.
The site itself, Clifton Hill, is managed and owned by Bristol City Council. And we worked with them, we partnered up with them, and we negotiated this site, and they were very forthcoming.
The council have tools, and we only need them for a few weekends a year. The whole of Bristol, you have access to those tools. The council also provided health and safety training and first aid training and public liability insurance that would actually be really expensive, but also be a hassle to try and organise. So they supported us really well through that.
Mowing for this site is going to be varied, but the ultimate thing is it's going to be less.
By mowing your lawn less, you allow the flowers to develop, and we're hoping here we can get more flowers to develop than the current regime allows. Every time we mow the site, what we really want to do is remove those clippings and take nutrients off the site. The reason for this is those nutrients suppress wildflowers by enabling grass to grow. One thing that makes this site quite exciting is it's not getting the same management across the whole site. We've actually decided to do a bit of an experiment to work out what's the best way of establishing a wildflower meadow. The far site towards Clifton Village has been rotivated. The site next to that has been manually scarified by our lovely volunteers, which just means heavily raking and stripping back bare soil without disturbing the soil. And then finally there was a manually disturbed site which had been hand rotivated. So again, our volunteers turn the soil to reveal bare soil, and it's going to be really exciting to work out which method is best.
Yeah, so I'm going to walk past this as much as I can and watch it grow. Like that, when you're raking next to someone and planting seeds, then you just have a really good chat, and that's kind of what it's all about as well.
So pretty much anyone who wants to start a wildflower meadow, yellow rattle is a really good place to start. When it grows, it has little root nodules that latch onto the roots of grass and takes nutrients from the grass, which then makes it weaker and gives the other wildflowers more of a chance to grow.
This is the seed mix that we're sowing. We've got little ones that look like little shaving brushes, which are the knapweeds, greater knapweed and common knapweed. And then the tiniest ones are the poppies. You can see the different shapes of seeds, different colours, just shows the diversity.
So I have just split our seed mix, and those seeds are being added with compost, which just means they go a bit further, and you also better see where you last sprinkled them as well. So you need to make sure we're getting even coverage. When we're putting down the seed, we really need as much soil contact as possible. And if the person with a metal rake can do a final hard scarify, and the person following just put the seed on that bare soil. Once it's on the bare soil and you're happy, then we're going to systematically tread it down.
Certainly adding to our 10,000 steps.
We needed funds for the seeds and for the plug plants. So we raised the money through GoFundMe, and we had some donations, mostly from individuals.
Roots go down, so remember it doesn't go this way around.
We are capable of changing our behaviour quite drastically in a matter of weeks. We learned that with COVID, so why are we not doing the same for the environment?
I find it a nice break from work, and also a really nice way to kind of integrate into the community, because it's often so hard when you're a student to do that in a completely new city.
It's been great fun.
It's been really good fun.
Yeah.
It's been a really lovely day for it as well.
Yeah, the weather's been really good.
We had over 45 volunteers come over 2 days to help us establish our wildflower meadow in the centre of Clifton here. I'm really excited to see what comes through, what species do well on this soil and what don't. I'm sure some of them will be there in the spring. It's now April and we can see the fruits of our labour, about 85 different species coming through. Especially on this really grassy area, it's so good to see how much yellow rattle's coming through. So this is the plant that latches its own roots onto the grass's roots, therefore suppressing the grass, and hopefully will give all the other flowers more chance to grow. Here we are at the height of summer, and look at the meadow. Isn't it fantastic? It is actually a lot better than I imagined in year one. There's so much more life here in such a small area. All of that is food for the birds and the bees. It's amazing what nature can do if you give it a chance. So this plot next to me is clearly doing the best. It's bursting with life. There's colour from mainly the annuals, the poppies and the cornflowers. And the two other sites in the background, they're not doing bad, they're just taking their time. But this is just year one, and I'm really hopeful that in years to come, those second and third sites will really catch up. We really hope that this site will inspire as many gardeners, community groups, just to take hold of their green space and turn it from a lawn into a haven for wildlife. Bring as much colour to Bristol as we can.
Well, there we are. Hope you enjoyed that premiere of how we make a wildflower meadow. Thank you all for joining, and I guess we'll move on to some questions. Yeah, thanks Nick for the copy of the wildflower spotting guide. You can all download that from the chat. Yeah, just to have a look. Have a look at the website. There's lots of other things on there. One thing I should have said is there was probably a couple of other resources that we could share if of interest. So obviously slides we'll share, but for example, if you need help with the posters, we can probably send you a template for the posters and the consultation, land management plans or the planning we did. You know, we are happy to share. So if there's anything that that we've spoke about today, do drop us a message and we'd be more than happy to share and help. So I got a question from Nikki, just to clarify, Dan, did volunteers remove the clippings or did the council? Yeah, Nikki, good question. So the volunteers removed all the clippings. I must admit, probably 50% of the work that we had to do on the site was removing clippings. And so, yeah, the clippings themselves were picked up, put in a cardboard recycling bag, and then we put them in a little compost heap for year one. I think it kind of touches on a bigger question, which is about the longer term management of these areas. And I still do think the council can do a lot more in addressing how we get rid of these clippings. So I mentioned fertility is so key. We need to make sure that we're always removing the clippings from most sites. It's just, it's quite a lot of biomass to handle. But yeah, actually worth saying that the council did actually do the initial cut as well. But yeah, they leave the clippings because at the moment they don't have the machinery to take it away.
And can I just come in there? What's the plan there for the next year then? When the council cut it, what will you do with the clippings? Will you go back in as volunteers?
We're going to have to, yeah. So at the moment, so we do ultimately want to get to a point where the site is self-sufficient through the council's management plan. But at the moment, they just haven't got the machinery or the infrastructure to handle it. So we're just having to do it, which, happy to be involved. But I think if we are going to reach that 30% by 2030, we're going to have to come up with a better proposition for removing those clippings. But yeah, at the moment, especially for this site, because it's quite steep, machinery is quite tricky to get on it anyway. But other sites, especially if they're slightly flatter, we do need to invest in proper machinery that can both cut it and collect it at the same time, and then find a way of composting it somehow. But yeah, no, Nikki, it's definitely something we're trying to work out. No such thing as a silly question, Anna. But once it was all dug, did any more grass seed go on, or was it just assumed that it would turn and soil will come back? So no, Anna, we didn't put any grass seed down at all. Grass will always find a way to come back. I don't think you're ever going to get rid of grass, and I don't ever think it should be your ambition, because the grass does have its benefits. But we basically only sowed wildflower meadow seeds on the site rather than sowing any grasses as well. So it just came back itself. Thank you, Katie and Emma, for your comments. And yeah, again, big shout out to the filmmakers. I think we're fortunate enough to have Sue and Jeremy both have been in the industry as, what do we call ourselves? Green Hollywood Bristol. We're lucky to have that, and I do think it was represented very nicely in our film. So yeah, again, thank you so much to everyone involved in making that film, and to you lovely volunteers that were in it. Another question from Nikki, which is, any thoughts of the impact of drought? Were you tempted to take water? Yes. So I didn't really mention it, but obviously seeds need water. But the great thing about a wildflower meadow, you don't need to worry about watering it so much. Obviously with droughts, it is a risk. but I would say personally, don't try and don't feel like you need to water your wildflower meadow. It's not meant to be. I think we got away with it this year, just especially for those first 2 sites, because they really had quite good roots established. The third site, I mean, if any of you walked past it in September, it hadn't really got much cover, and I think that was mainly drought affected. So yeah, like I said, we had such a dry March, April, that they didn't really have a chance to get going. So definitely we had a bit of impact. And obviously in September, those photos that I had up at the end, you could see, just how dry that grass was, and it was quite drastic. But the flowers survived, and we're hoping that next year that they will do even better. Another one about watering the site. So we didn't water the site at all. I think maybe it could have benefited from it, but like I said, like ours is a relatively small site next to buildings. We just still didn't feel the need. I think just fingers crossed. But I would say getting it in earlier, and actually if Sean, you want to come in on that at all, I welcome you. But I think getting the seeds in early, especially when we're going through this more, the extreme weather patterns, getting those roots established is so critical to the survival of the wildflower. So our scientific experiment shows that, sowing in April was way too late. If you're going to do it in the new year, so to speak, doing it as early as possible is better. But from, our evidence that getting the seeds in the ground in November, getting those plants in the ground in November, so they have that frost, but they also have time to develop the roots, will just make them more tolerant to drought. Where's the best place to buy seeds? Yeah, I've mentioned Grow Wilder, but obviously there's other retailers out there. Do your research. Just one thing I would say is really do try and do definitely UK natives, and if you can, get local stock. And that's why we're very happy with the service we got from Grow Wilder, and they obviously provide you with other little benefits, like you can go and visit where they grow all their own seeds, and they have provided that survey as well. So what's your view on the optimal combination of variables for soil prep and sowing time? So Vivian, good question. So sowing time, I think I've just covered. I am definitely a believer in getting it in the ground before Christmas, doing it, early winter, late autumn, just gives it time to do the roots. In terms of soil disturbance, I don't think I'm going to answer that yet. I think we'll do a webinar in a year's time, and let's see how that scarified site did. I think we were probably more impressed with the bit that was soil disturbed this year because of the annuals that come through, so the poppies and the cornflowers. But if you look closely at that middle site that didn't have any soil disturbance, I wouldn't be surprised if it did almost as well, if not better than the rotivated site. So maybe come back in a year or next summer, go and have a look yourself. But I don't think. Yeah, well, actually, for getting initial wildflowers up and running, disturbance seems to work, but I think it'll bide its time, and you probably won't be able to notice the difference in 3 or 4 years, would be my guess. So I'm just loads of questions coming in. Amazing. Mary, which method works best to create the wildflower meadow? Scarifying, hand turning, or machine rotivating? Yeah. So yeah, the results are just to repeat is definitely in year 1, the one that did have soil disturbance but was sown early did the best in terms of both diversity and biomass. But I'm convinced that after year 2 we might have slightly different results. So we'll keep you updated on that. This year, have we reseeded it? So yeah, Mary, we have reseeded it, but only with seeds that we harvested on the site. So we haven't bought any more seeds. We just used the seeds that were there, and we did let it self-seed as well. So when any of the volunteers, there's quite a few of them on the call, I think, but when we were doing that seed harvesting, when we were cutting, you'd look at the soil and there was just thousands of seeds just lying on the bare soil. So I am convinced there was hundreds of thousands of seeds that we produced that just did self-seeded. So I'm expecting some good things. Whether you get a domination, one or two of the species start to dominate, time will tell. The oxeye daisy looks like it's doing really well at the moment. I went and looked at it today. There's a lot of patches where it's just thick oxeye daisy, so we might just have a load of those next year. Still beautiful. Naturally, let's just see how it develops. But other things, the yellow rattle as well was doing a lot. Do you expect all 3 experimental sites to look the same as each other next summer, Julie? Yeah, I would say I'd be interested to know how that rotivated site does. because we put some more seeds down from the other two sites to try and share it, but there a lot of the perennials that we would have hoped to establish, because the drought didn't, I showed that photo earlier, so there's still actually areas of bare soil now, so unless those seeds take stock, I'm still convinced that rotation site's going to be the worst, but we shall see. I think between the other two it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Now we haven't got any soil disturbance this year, so they're technically all starting from this year with no soil disturbance. Julie asks, I think there was a strip that you left unseeded and untreated to see what came up from the original heritage of seeds in the bank. Did you notice anything that come up? So yeah, well, actually I didn't mention the slides. Well remembered, Julie. So both between sites 1A and 1B on the meadow, we didn't seed anything. And on the floral lawn, there was a patch that we also didn't seed. Now the floral lawn, I'm sadly kind of writing off because I don't think it got the chance to even get any results before the mower unfortunately came through. However, the between the two sites, the wildflowers, we just had so much grass. Like, it was unbelievable how much tussocky grass came through, like cocksfoot and dog's tail and a couple of other those like coarse grasses. And I think the sole reason for that is there was no yellow rattle there. And I'll have to dig up some photos and can probably share them, but you could drastically see where the yellow rattle had been and where it hadn't. And the bit that we left, even though it had a couple of red clovers come through and a couple of other, daisies, for example, it was so dominated by grass because it didn't have that input from the yellow rattle. Assuming you won't be disrupting the soil again, maybe you won't be expecting poppies to go on flowering. Yeah, exactly right, Pippa. So I would be, next year we're probably going to get a thin smattering of poppies, but the year after, I think poppies are going to slowly fade away. And that's simply because, exactly as you say, we're not disturbing the soil anymore. They don't have that, that bed to rest on. And they're now competing with the, this layer of perennial herb that's kind of formed as well. So yeah, we shall see, and I think some wildflower enthusiasts, they don't really want to see poppies in there anyway, because they're not traditional wildflower species. But like I said, we did it because it brought a bit more colour, especially in year one, to get the people on side. It's so important to make sure the public are engaged, and poppies and cornflowers did a great job at it this year. Sean, final point, great presentation, great film, and great meadow. Thank you, Dan, and everybody involved. Yeah, Sean, thank you so much for your time. I know you put in a lot of time, and we occasionally catch you having a little nose over there. So yeah, no, really great working with you and looking forward to next year. It is worth saying that we have got 2 new sites potentially that we're going to be involved in this year. Do watch this space for where they are. They're both in the Clifton area. We've just got to finalize some points around management and some points around permissions, but the noises are all quite positive. And Katie, our Green Councillor, has just said we've got permission today. Oh, there we are. So the announcement's been made. Great. Yes, Katie. Yeah, do you want to do an announcement? Thank you.
Well, it's not a giant announcement. Hello, everybody. Just wanted to, it was quite good timing because we were in the Downs Committee today. And yes, Dan, we did indeed get them to give their green light. Isn't that great? So we will be working on a couple of sites identified by Dan and also by a council officer to basically rake and possibly spread some seed at some point, or do some plant plugging and possibly involve some children, but certainly love volunteer power for that. And yeah, we'll see that coming into being soon.
Amazing. Well, I didn't realize we got permission already. So that's hot off the press, everyone. So yeah, 2 sites. One of them is as you come out of the old zoo and up that bank, there's a grassy bank that's on the side of the downs. We're going to just try and improve that. It's already being managed for wildflowers, but there's just some additional bit of help that Elbow Grease can give. And then there's another site on the top of the downs as well. It's about 0.5 hectares where the car park for the zoo used to be. We will be doing a bit of a statement on that through our West Bristol Climate Action newsletter. So if you're not subscribed to that, please go on our website and sign up, and you can hear more about that. But particularly if you do want to get involved volunteering, it's a slightly bigger site than what we currently did. So we're going to need more volunteers, more people on the ground to get involved and help. Perfect. So just some final comments from Tom. Could you imagine the council would be receptive to incorporating limestone strips or patches for solitary bees? Could be a good way to frame and act as a barrier. Tom, yeah, really good point actually. So ecologically, there's, you know, what we need is diversity. Diversity is key, and that's not both the, you know, the species, the fauna, but also the habitats that they rely on. And what Tom's mentioning here is that there's a load of species of bee in the country. I think, you know, 50, 60, maybe even more. And some of them burrow under the ground. They're solitary. They live on their own, but they burrow under the ground. And maybe we can look at incorporating, you know, something that to encourage those bees to have somewhere to hibernate. He mentioned limestone strips, sometimes just keeping soil bare, you know, just somewhere where they can burrow is quite a nice thing to do. So yeah, Tom, if you're the Tom I know, great, nice to see you. If you're another Tom and you're not on our mailing list, do feel free to get involved, because it sounds like you know what you're talking about. So it gives me, I suppose, great pleasure to say thank you all for coming. I don't think there's any more questions. What I have been asked to do is just put one more slide on the screen, just to remind you of all the details of what we've spoken about today. So if you want to get involved or donate, here is the page. But if not, thank you so much for attending. Recording will be shared through the usual avenues, and we look forward to having you on the next event coming soon. Thank you so much.